Maybe what Len says is right, but I think the main thing is bringing other horses into the sport. Some may be sold out of the sport, yes, but they started bumpers under rules to try and promote within their sport, and pointing is doing the same, maybe, hopefully, for pointing and under rules. But it's still, we're still in the infancy. We'll see what next season brings. We're either bumpers, but 4-year-olds are going through and running well later on in their careers in both national and pointing.
Any of the forum got a different opinion to what Alan has just said, or like to add to that? Let's move on.
I'm going to say one thing, mainly because I like to have a chat to Len. I haven't seen him for a long time. No, not really. But just don't forget, several winners of these 4-year-old maidens and winners of the bumpers are being sold. There are plenty of other horses running in the race that should stay within pointing. It's not just the winners. It's all the horses that run in those races.
And I just say, I think on that we want them to come back again. The risk is that some of these horses are running too early, and we need to make sure they've got opportunities. Perhaps when they're a gangly 4-year-old, they stay until they're a 5-year-old. We give them the opportunity at that stage to come. Otherwise, we're just going to break them down, etc., etc.
When's lunch? I'm hungry.
When's lunch? You go and start.
Just one comment. I mean, I'm not particularly for point-to-point bumpers, but we've got them, so I accept we've got it. And I take what you've said about about horses being sold for a lot of money. Now, I'm quite happy with that because it does promote pointing and how we're being initiative. Yeah, that word. Yeah. But I do not think a winner of a point-to-point flat race should be allowed to run in a maiden race, because it's not a maiden anymore, and we definitely don't want to go down that line. Now, I am of the thought if it's won a flat race, it's going to get sold, it's not going to go pointing anyway, so let's just keep them out of maidens. The ones that have been second and third, yeah, they're still a maiden, running maidens, and hopefully they'll stay in point-to-point sport.
And we differ on that one. And somebody else had a hand up there. Mark Warby.
Hi there. Just to make the point, I think there's been a lot of progress made in the last 3 or 4 years with trying to get the races sorted out. The races were very set in stone, very old-fashioned, and it's great to see the races actually changing their format. And yes, there's going to be some differences, people worried about it going one way or the other, but we've got to accept there is a certain amount of commerciality that has to happen, but as long as you keep the old-fashioned farmer type happy as well, it's just nice to see. It's great people are questioning it.
Nick, do you have any comments on that?
Well, there's a lot of people in this sport who are making a living out of it, and that's a good thing, by the way, because we live in a world where everyone has to make a living doing something. I think to allow people the opportunity to, do what is going on in Ireland, produce young horses and make money out of it, I think is a fantastic thing, because that will attract more people into our sport. If people think they can make a living out of it, they will come into the sport. I agree we have to keep the balance, and I think we've got the balance reasonably right at the moment between young horses. The vast majority of races are not for 4- and 5-year-old maidens. The vast majority. We've got to remember that. And I don't see that changing enormously. It'll evolve over time, but it won't change enormously.
Nick?
Yes, I've obviously been involved in race planning committee and things, and we are catering to a very broad church. We've got to cater for the 4- and 5-year-olds. We've got to cater for horses coming back from under rules. In our northwest area, our leading horse this year and last, who's won it 2 years running, was a gift horse, who was a failure under rules, who came out and won 4 races last season. He's won 4 races in a Hunter Chase this season, and he's running the John Corbett tonight. And he's ridden by basically an owner rider, and he's a great advert for what pointing is all about. But likewise too, we've seen in our area horses that have run in the point-to-point bumper at the Quorn, who got beaten, who then came out and run over fences at Tadley, and we had 3 4-year-olds battling out the finish to our maiden at Tadley, and it was a great spectacle. So we are catering to a broad church. Basically, it is down to how we frame races. and people in this room will help influence how those races are framed for the future. So speak to your fixture committees, speak to your area secretaries, and let's all frame imaginatively so that we can cater for a wide range of horses and a wide range of riders.
On that topic, and it's just like, this is from a member that we've had sent in, she's finding it impossible to buy a horse that stays for more than 2 miles. Is there any appetite, panel, for 2-mile races? And I have to ask the question because the member that asked it. Who's going to answer it?
Me.
Go on.
I can't see the point in having 2-mile point-to-points. I mean, the hunter chase, the hunter chase tonight, there's a 2-mile hunter chase, it's well supported. They'll go, there's 18 runners, they're going to go right like dingbats. You're going to learn absolutely bugger all. And to be quite frank, point-to-point isn't for that. It'll suit certain horses. There are about 4 or 5 2-mile hunter chases. Fine, let's leave it at that.
Can I, Jerry Coward, you had a question about body protectors and introduction of...
Oh, there was something said about they're going to upgrade them.
Yeah, they're going, yeah.
There was something said in one of the things they're going to upgrade the body protector. Why didn't they do it 2 years ago when they made them have a new one? And if they're going to upgrade it 1 grade, I know it's too much to do with the national hunting, etc. Why instead of going to level 2, why they go straight to level 3, follow new jockeys that are coming in, and then, because they're so damn expensive, and it's, like the lady said over there, everything's cost, doesn't it? Yeah, we're going to encourage them to do it, you know.
I think the position is it hasn't actually been agreed it's going to come in at the moment, but it will follow BHA.
There is a proposal, Jerry, for a new body protector to come in under rule. But the point is, it's more sophisticated, and they're constantly working on the research and development. So, you know, they didn't know they were going to be able to introduce it. It was due time. They didn't know they were going to be able to spec one that's much more effective. But it's way beyond my pay grade to explain about the effectiveness of body protection.
Yeah, well,
but I can give you I can get somebody to give you the right answer.
Yeah, they only got one 2 years ago, didn't they?
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
really
if this one is
Claire, are you able
much
to
more effective.
enlighten them? So Claire Hazel. Lucy here.
Yeah. Sorry, Lucy, I'm passing it back.
Lucy Price.
Hi, Lucy Price.
BHA.
As Andrew mentioned, there is a proposal at the moment going through under rules. This was a notification that we wanted to make a while ago. It's as Andrew mentions, it's something that is agreed not over in Ireland as well as over here amongst the medical committees. With regard to how that's rolled out and the cost, which is obviously understandable, we're following suit with that, but ultimately we're going to ensure that there is a bedding in period for that, so that riders are made aware and that there is a sort of that they have that time to have that notification and make those changes. It makes sense to mirror what happens under rules, not just that, because also stable lads also have to wear that body protector. So we are getting to that place where body protectors will be consistent throughout the community.
That answers sort of answer the question, but we are where we are with that. Can I any other questions from the floor? No, at the back, go on.
Is there a question on horse numbers? Is that applicable at this time?
Go on.
Basically, Tim Garth. I think we're all concerned about the reduction in horse numbers, especially as the standard of the sport has never been higher. And I think that is part of the problem. The standard of training of horses, the quality of some of these horses is very, very high. Far, probably harder to win at a bad point-to-point than a 0 to 100 chase. So it costs a lot of money. If you now to send a horse, and say you send it to a trainer, keeper, it's going to cost somebody about £1,000 plus a month, I guess, somewhere in that area, which is a lot of money for a normal person on a normal earned income. I spoke recently to a lady who does a lot of pony racing. Pony racing, they are apparently mainly all training their own ponies. The problem is, when they come out of pony racing, the standard is that high on the point-to-point course that people basically don't want to make idiots of themselves. And I think this needs addressing. We need to keep the standards high, but we need to allow or have races which are open to people of lesser capability. Not that we want the standard to drop, but we need to take that into consideration, or it'll be an uphill struggle to get horse numbers up.
And that's where we come back to innovation with our fixtures at the end of the day. There's some questions down here. Whilst we're moving around, I had Peter Bergen, a member's written in about going reports, and I'm going to just make the comment really that it is something that is very important as far as the Owners and Riders Association are concerned, and certainly something we discuss at committee quite a lot, is the absolute importance of making sure that secretaries and fixtures put accurate and timely going reports on the website and into the public domain. And I'm sure that's something that the whole meeting will agree with, and something that we ought to be taking back to the secretaries, if you're agreeable, and something we're really fighting for. Does anybody have any comments on that? Alan, you travel around the country quite a bit.
Totally agree, a very important ingredient, isn't it? Your going report, it's what governs it. So yes, it would be of a great help if we could. I, in a small amateur way, do a video one, because I think then you're showing to people that look at it how far the stick goes in, what the grass is like and all that. But I think at times it would be helpful also if they were updated more regularly.
Absolutely. As you said, timeliness is as much as important as anything else, especially when things change and you have some localised weather, which you might not have in the West Country, but you've got in East Anglia, etc., etc. Because it's the travellers that get caught out. Question here.
Tim Sagian. I'd like to thank David for addressing the issue of the point-to-point bumpers weights. As an area rep, most of the feedback I get is grumble about the weight for age allowance. And one of the things which has been raised and which I can see is that we reduce the allowance for 5-year-olds on March the 1st, but we don't do that for 4-year-olds. And under National Hunt rules, in hurdle races, from a 4-year-old over 3 miles in the 1st of February gets a £12 allowance, but it drops to £5 at the end of May. And it seemed logical to me that if we drop the 5-year-old's allowance by £3 to allow for its development during the season, but we don't allow for the development of a 4-year-old. So is that question also going to be addressed in the weights for next year?
It's probably too technical for us at this end. That's looking at David. But Richard Russell is here. Polly, Polly had a question. Let's go to Polly Gundry first, or Polly Walker. You'll always be Polly Gundry. Another former champion, Lady Ryan. You've got lots of them.
Yes, I just wanted to back up that you're going to discuss, but that I think the whole sport is very anti-10 stone in point-to-points, and that I do hope that they are definitely going to be changed. But I'll pass you on to Richard Russell, because hopefully he's going to add to that.
Richard Russell from PHA.
To answer Tim's point, that it's a very quick point, very quick answer, that you're looking at the hurdle scale, Tim, not the chase scale.
There is no chase scale, because they aren't allowed to run until the 1st of May.
Correct. So throughout the point-to-point season, it doesn't change, because they're effectively playing catch-up throughout the whole of the season. It only comes right at about May.
But if you have a
Hold on, I'm going to go to Mark Ward and come back to you.
Right, I think, certainly I feel, and everyone else that I speak to was very happy with the rules beforehand, where it was set in stone, 11-7, 11 stone for the 5-year-old fillies, and to lose that to the 4-year-olds and have a stone and a half difference was just an absolute killer, especially as most people have a slightly backward type of animal, and if it's running against a 4-year-old that is there to be sold, it is then going to get, it's not fair on the 5-year-olds, and they're set back another year, and it doesn't encourage people to keep a backward type of horse. It seems very unfair. I think a lot of people...
Mark, you weren't here when we discussed that. But the 4-year-olds have not dominated the maidens at all. And the figures are here. The 4-year-olds have not dominated the maidens at all. So can't say that 10 stone is...
It's not good for them to have that much weight.
No, but no one can ride them. No one can do the 10 stone weights.
Well, there seem to be quite a few riding at 10 stone around here,
I'll
anyway.
come back to Polly. Let's go to Tim Sage, and then we'll go to Polly Walker and Len. So, and then we'll come back to the panel. No, okay, Polly and Len.
We are not going to look to run many 4-year-olds because we don't want young ladies that are probably not strong enough to handle a 16, 3, 4-year-old flying around 2.5 miles. And we're very anti the 4-year-olds because of the weights and because we can't have stronger jockeys riding them. I think Len might add something extra as well.
Len?
I just think you're wrong by saying that 26 4-year-olds have won. I don't know whether you can say 26 5-year-olds have won a maiden point this year. I'll stand corrected, but I think more 4-year-olds have won than 5-year-olds. Out of last year's crop, only 5 of them have come back into the run.
I don't think my statistician has come up with 5-year-olds, but certainly 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds and 6.
Not
What?
fiction. Is that the facts?
I haven't got the facts then.
We could look up 5 years.
And the other thing is, I'm
last
just
season.
really keen that the participants within the sport are listened to, and I know that we're not all very good at shouting it out, but I do send a few emails around. But I do canvass a lot of opinion, and that's where these opinions come from. The fact that so many jockeys are struggling to do the weights, and you're going to knock out. As a mother, you're encouraged to make sure your baby doesn't lose weight, and so babies and children and the population are getting bigger and bigger, and the weights are getting lower and lower. So that is why we've got less jockeys.
Yeah, exactly.
Can I just go back, Len? We will get our president to look up the number of 5-year-olds, and we will make sure that you get that information. And Nick, I'm going to try and draw this topic to a close, but Nick Bostock.
Yeah, I was just going to say, maybe it is something we could look at along the lines of what Tim's just said, because I've had the same thoughts myself, that whether with the 4-year-olds we mirror the 5-year-olds from 1st of March and 1st of May and have a slightly reducing scale. It is a slightly different sport to under rules, and maybe we may need to look at that. If we're allowed to.
And I would say in conclusion that the race planning committee should take on board the views that have been expressed today at their next meeting and see where we go from there. We're not going to make any decisions today, but they should certainly listen to what's being said.
Yeah.
Can we move on to a different subject?
Jeff Barford Songs again. This is a different subject, but it really does tie in with a lot of what we've been talking about, brings it all together in one. The organisation of the point-to-points at individual level. So the Berkeley point-to-point, the Glamorgan point-to-point. To put on a point-to-point takes a lot of hard work by unpaid volunteers who are there to make money for their hunt, and most of them are there, or a lot of them are there, having been in the past, or still are, involved competitively. Either used to own a horse, used to ride a horse, they've got children or family who are involved physically competing. Now, with the reduced numbers of riders, you are reducing the number of people who in the future will be there physically putting the fences up, putting the paddock up, taking the money on the gate, doing the secretary jobs. With the Berkeley, for example, when I first was involved with the Berkeley some years ago, the week before the point-to-point, there'd be 40 or 50 or more people on the course helping to run it. They're down to, if you got into double figures, you would have been lucky this year. And Alan, I'm quite sure you have experienced the same putting on your point-to-point. And Robert, the point-to-point owners and riders point-to-point has now got to the point where you can't get enough help to put one on at all. This is all tied in with, we've got to encourage the true amateur, because it is the true amateur who, even if they only ride for 2 or 3 years, will then carry on their interest and carry on putting the sport on. If we don't encourage the amateur, if we don't put the amateur in front of the professional, there won't be any racing, full stop. So we need to really think about how we encourage youngsters and owner riders, farmers' sons into the sport.
Okay. Thanks very much, Jeff. I think perhaps I'll start if you like. I think as far as you're absolutely right, and I would also say that the backbone of pointing is still the hunt at the end of the day, and that's why it's difficult as far as a club meeting to do, because you don't have that backbone necessarily of the hunt. But the hunts that are struggling are those that haven't necessarily got point-to-point people within their hunting country. And certainly if you go to the Welsh borders or whatever, they haven't got the horses qualifying, and they are struggling as a result of that. And I take your point completely, and that's why we have got to encourage I don't want to use the word true amateur, but those people who will have an involvement in the sport going forward. And I'm going to pass on to, I'll come back to you, Jeff, you've had your say. I'm going to pass to Andrew.
Well, I mean, I might not agree. I married to someone who was point-to-point picture secretary for a long time and didn't get the help. Funnily enough, she didn't, in her case, get the help from hunting people, because they wanted to go, mind you, they were mad harriers and stuff. We've got to encourage people. But I think it's a slightly generational, and I'm going to make a very, very risky comment, but I think it is a slightly generational thing. I can think of a heck of a lot of riders well, I can think of quite a few people who've been involved in point-to-point, taking the benefit of it, who maybe don't put as much back as a lot of people in this world. And I think we've got to encourage that. But if you sorry, that's only my contribution.
David, Nick. Alan, anybody want to make a point?
Look, I mean, you know, Jeff makes exactly the right point. There isn't a silver bullet here, by the way. It's basically about everybody here evangelising about the sport we're in, talking to people, getting people into it. It's about framing races the correct way for, if you want to frame races for that type of rider. Yeah, all the tools are here within our hands. The one thing that's out of our control is the economy, the economics of running horses is what it is. And we can't change that. You know, that's the one thing we can't change.
Alan, any comments?
We agree, Jeff. Go on. I totally agree with you. I think it is very, very important that the people that have had a lot out of the sport give back to the sport. And if there is a magic answer, you know, I think we'd all love to know. I'm very true. And like you say, going to, at my point, I've got 2 or 3 local farmers that have never ridden a horse that help me. The people that have ridden racing, they just seem to disappear. I don't know how we can address that. I really don't. I ask, I encourage, but it doesn't always work.
I was probably going to move on to another question. Has anybody got comments on what we're just talking about? Gary, you're different. So I'll just deal with these 2 ladies here, and then we'll come back to you and move on to a new topic, and we'll probably draw into a close around so we're going to get some lunch.
Lorney Hill, I think probably from our experience as well that hunting suffers the same problem if you organise not just a point-to-point but a hunter trial or cheese and wine or anything like that. It's very difficult to get hunting people to come along and help at those dues. I don't think it's just point-to-pointing. How many subscribers do you know? So, you know, you're down to your gate shutting, oh, I'm not going to do that. And they'll pay someone else to do it because probably they can't even get off their horse because their air jacket won't let them. But this is so true in hunting these days. It's not just in point-to-pointing. The subscriber we have these days, how many farmers' sons do you have out with you? We have so few with us. It really is disappointing to not see the farmers' sons. We would love to see more farmers out hunting, but they're not interested to do it now. And I think it isn't just point-to-pointing. I think it's perhaps a town versus country thing, personally.
Can I go to Carly Sage and I'm going to Darren Edwards and then change to that topic? If you can be brief, actually, sorry.
Carly Sage, North West area. I'm probably one of the youngest stewards and clerk of courses in the country, in my 30s, and I did a lot of point-to-pointing, road, finished my riding and just was a spectator. I was encouraged by Nick Bostock to get involved, to help steward, now on point-to-point committees, and I absolutely love this sport. So please, if you know anybody that is retiring from riding, ring them up, get them to get behind these, these fixtures, get them to get on committees, stewarding, anything, because there's not many my age in our area that are helping with these point-to-points, and we will lose this sport if you don't encourage people.
Yeah, Darren Edwards, based in the Midlands, but right mainly in the West Country. I think just maybe an agenda item then for the fixture list committee is I think we need to look at rationalisation of fixtures, because Jeff raised the point there, and we've just been talking about it, is the number of helpers feeding into points is reducing, the number of horses is less, the number of jockeys is less. So to react to that, in my view, you need to rationalise the number of fixtures. There needs to be perhaps more course sharing, sharing of responsibility between meetings. Take one example in the West Country is Holnicut. They run 2 points, 2 weekends following. They share the responsibility between the Minot Harriers and the Devon and Somerset Staghounds, and it works really well. They share the course, the two club together. I'm not sure how far the sharing goes as far as the economics are concerned, but invariably the second meeting does lose out slightly because ground sometimes is rougher in the second meeting. But collectively they share responsibility, and that's only going to help the longevity and the continuation of these meetings going forward. But I think you can't keep expecting to run just as many point-to-points with the numbers falling, be those helpers, participants, horses, whatever. So just something fixture committee.
Graham, I'd just say on that, I think it's absolutely essential that fixtures do work together. I know that Blackmoor and Sparks and Mendip share fences, for example. They move from one course to the other. So it is important that everybody is working together. That goes back to innovation, exactly, etc.
Mr. Chairman, I welcome this forum that you've got here. I am disappointed there's nobody from the PPSA on it, because this is what I need to address.
That's fine, because we felt that we only wanted 4, and we've put the 4 that we thought would take all the flak onto this forum, and so there we are. So
okay,
we can take a message back to the PPSA, don't worry.
Right. Can the meeting here, who oversees the activities of the PPSA, and who gives them the authority to sanction demands from hunts for car park compensation and detrimental alterations to their race card, when the meetings are not even on the same day and some 80 miles apart? This sort of behaviour is tantamount to blackmail and extortion and should not be tolerated, let alone sanctioned by the PPSA or anyone else. Hunts provide the majority of meetings and should be encouraged to work together for the good of our sport. So please, can we hear who is in charge of our sport, and what assurances can be given to ensure such unsporting behaviour is not backed up by elected officials as happened this season?
Andrew, do you want to answer that as far as you can on behalf of the PPSA?
I won't answer it on behalf of the PPSA, but I answer it on behalf of the PPA. And the answer is rather complicated. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Sorry, I my voice. I can answer it on behalf of the PPA. It is the point-to-point authority is ultimately responsible under the delegation from the BHA for everything that happens in point-to-points. But this was obviously a very unusual season in terms of abandonments and rearrangements, and we learned a lot. And it is entirely currently, according to the instruction booklet, as I'm sure you're all aware, in the gift of the PPSA as to, and ultimately the PPSA chairman or a panel organised by the PPSA chairman, I think I'm right, as to how meetings are rearranged. I think it's proven this year that that is not satisfactory, and it is absolutely on, and has been, Nick will nod, on the PPA or everyone, Alan, it is on our agenda, and we're going to look at it to make sure that that it's revised before next season.
Nick, do you have any comments on that?
Just going back to thank Darren for his, sorry, I'd just like to go back and thank Darren for his input regarding the fixture list committee. Darren, exactly that point, we want to make sure that we have a calendar spread of racing, we have a geographical spread of racing, and we have the right number of meetings to meet our horse population. So that's absolutely the forefront of what we're looking at.
Can I just pick up again on Graham's point? The PPORA committee did discuss that point, and they were not in favour of any sort of bartering or a hunt paying another hunt. It's different if hunts within an area supporting other hunts. That's a completely different reason, because some hunts might be more successful, be able to run better, and you can support the little hunts. But certainly the question of bartering was not approved by the PPORA committee, and I personally find it abhorrent.
Chairman, very similar to the MFHA. Now, they looked upon it very dimly as well when it was brought up at our meeting.
Mark Wall, and we've got 5 minutes, guys.
As we know, 20 points costs a lot to put on. The fences cost an enormous amount to keep rebirched, and that probably is the mainstay of what cost to put 20 points on. If you go up to Lambourne and you go over the all-weather fences, the fences go beautifully, and those fences are plastic and don't cost anything to keep. Is there any way, shape or form we could get plastic fences that you could move around and keep in an area? It would reduce costs greatly and make things a lot more viable. And it's something I feel ought to be thought of if it can't be soon.
Any comments from the forum? I know it has been discussed in the past and put to one side. Any thoughts or?
The only feedback I've had, and this is from Richard Lindley, who is not pro those fences under rules, and that's why we have no course under rules here in Britain using them. So though I had those type of fences at home, I used to school. There they are covered. I use them at home, and I totally agree with you, Mark. You know, the initial cost of buying, but the maintenance is nothing. At the moment, when I spoke to Richard Lindley about it 4 or 5 years ago, he was very anti them being brought into British racing.
I see it in Ireland. I see them using them in Ireland, which is, and they can move them from course to
Yeah,
course.
I totally agree with you.
One set of fences that would go from the whole area. It would just reduce the cost dramatically.
Point taken, Mark. I want Charles Dixon.
Charles Dixon. I mean, I understand in Ireland. I think there are only 4 sets of fences which do the whole of the Southern Ireland. They move round on a regular basis. And the basic difference, I think, between the Irish fence and the English fence, the fence itself is the same, the front is different. And the plastic, the grass on the front of the fence makes it easier to move. To try and move our fences and share them with an area would be much more difficult. So it's only the fronts of the fences. And what happens over in Ireland, you have your race meeting on a Saturday or Sunday, they then school 100 horses the following day, and then the fences move on for the next Saturday. And I think, as I say, I think there are only 4 sets of fences in the whole of Southern Ireland. The cost savings, and having just put down a new course at Edgecombe, we know all about costs.
And you did a jolly good job at first season. One more question, and that's going to be it, and it's going to be the person who's putting their hand up through there.
It's me again, sorry I'm calling out. I just, Mark's point is a very good idea, but I can tell you, as a carpet course, you have such a short window, you're waiting and waiting to put those fences out.
If you're quick, I can ask you.
And once
the
they're
next
out,
question.
they stay there.
One more question behind. Someone's waving their hand. No? Yes, go on.
Thank you, sir. Sorry, just going back again. I would like to sort of ask, has the PPOA got any control over some of the Twitter and Facebook comments that have been made over the last at least 12 months in reference to national hunt trainers or licensed trainers competing in hunter chases? Some of the comments are totally inappropriate. I saw Mr. Murray there sort of screening a little bit. I think he knows what I'm talking about. It's totally inappropriate. For a point-to-point, national hunt racing is actually the plan that could be defeating point-to-pointing.
I don't know anything about that.
I don't have a Twitter account. Or never
I think, Chris, one of the points there, we have had questions, as always, about professional trainers. competing in hunter chases, and it's something that we have talked about year on year, and we're not going to change the situation at the end of the day, and we've got to accept it, I think. And I'm sure that's what the panel would say at the end of the day.
I think so, they should be made more welcome.
But that's an interesting point, isn't it? Goody. I'm going to draw things to a conclusion because it is nearly 1:15 and we've got lunch, we've got a drinks reception to go to and lunch. And I would first of all like to thank the forum and forum members for coming up here and answering questions. And doing that.